it's recording. And don't forget this. This is for the recording.
All right, welcome. You guys ready to go?
Yeah.
All right, did you have a good time last night?
Yeah.
All right, a little coffee, a little water this morning maybe? The oatmeal stick in your tummy? Yeah. Welcome to Information Technology Project Management. We've got Cynthia Nelson and Tashawn Christie here. So I will turn the mic over to them and get started.
So welcome everyone. Good morning. I know it's probably a long night last night, so we're going to do our best to bore you and put you to sleep. This is the herd and cat session is what we are calling it between ourselves, but it's actually IT project management. What we're hoping is to have some interactivity because, you know, an hour and 15 minutes sometimes is a little hard to fill, especially when you're used to doing 30-minute staff meetings and such. So we're going to try our best to be interactive. If we say anything during the session that you don't quite get fully, or if it just seems ambiguous to you, raise your hand, ask a question. You know, we'll answer it as best we can, or we'll ignore it if we can't answer it. So just make sure that we're together on this, all right? So our introductions, who we are. So I am Tashawn Christie, CTL. I am the Director of Technology at Highline Public Schools. We are wrapped around the SeaTac Airport. We have 19,500 students, a pretty diverse student population. I am primarily responsible for student information, data, day-to-day operations of technology department and such, and a lot of other things that beep and twist and blink. So, and this is Cynthia.
Good morning, I'm Cynthia Nelson, the Technology Director for the Edmond School District, which is north of Seattle, about 20,000 students, 32 schools. And in addition to being CETL, I'm actually a PMP, which is a certification for project management. Wow, aren't you guys impressed? You shouldn't be. But anyway, I think that's why I got roped into doing this presentation this morning.
So again, one of the things that we're going to try to do is remove all the jargon, which is extremely important because the dangerous part about project management is the fact that everyone is subject to it, so that we all have some of the terms, but some of the terms have been used so much in so many other different ways that we've kind of lost that connection between what it actually is and supposed to be and what you can do with it. So what we're hoping to do is really put this all into layman's terms and work out how best that you can do what you need to do in your own organization. Project management happens at varying levels. A lot of it starts with a project manager, but in a lot of the school districts, there's no project manager. Basically what happens is you put a bunch of tasks together and call it a project, right? So real quick, and we want to find out who you are so that we know what to say and what not to say. No, so that we know whether or not some of you are our project managers and can kind of help us out as we go through this. Because there's some areas of project management that are kind of obscure, but there's also some things that people do in their buildings and school districts that are best practices that maybe we don't do. Because what we've learned is that project management in and of itself is flexible. There's a lot of options that you have. But a lot of times it's just making sure that you have your tasks in a row and that you're checking off tasks. So we're going to talk through a bunch of different methodologies and stuff. But if you have devices and you want to participate, if you could bring those out. And the danger of technology, hoping that this works. If not, then I'm just going to ask for a show of hands. There we go. So we have a poll. How much experience do you have with project management? So if you can't read, this is an eye test. If you can't read from the back, it's pollev.com. And the URL is, the end is Tashawn Chris, TSHON CHRIS 291. Or you can text Tashawn Chris 291 to 37607 to join. And based on this, we will tailor the rest of the message. So please participate, because if not, we're going to deal directly with these two groups and ignore everything else pretty much. That's interesting. So that's the whole interactive part of our session, just so you know. I know, aren't you impressed? I coded this myself last night. All right, managed a few small projects. That's kind of what we thought, was that everyone has had a project that they've managed or been a part of or done a few things to. So we're going to keep this later. And the 12% that are project managers, or 14 or so, definitely raise your hands if we say something that's completely off, and we can, do our best to try to reach some middle ground. Because like I said, it's considered a semi-exact science. There's a methodology to it. But at the same time, sometimes it's specific to your environment and your culture and how you manage a project. So it's very important to realize that there's no, this is the way that it's done. So thank you. So what PMs do, as a project manager, our job is to make sure that we know where all the bits and bytes are for our project. We're supposed to know who's involved. Take the vision that was given to us, or even if it wasn't a vision, take the idea or take the you need to do this and condense it into its subsequent parts. So we're supposed to say that this is what you're asking for, this is what we can do, this is what should be involved, and all that. So we're supposed to turn a vision into a reality through a project. This is the perception, right? Project managers take all the money and burn it, right? So just think of this as the villain in the project manager is the villain. All that is your hopes and dreams of a successful project, the budget, your project team, their egos, all that is the flaming part. This is what we have to fight through sometimes. Because I know even some of you are probably looking at this IT project management on the Hoover app, thinking, well, this is going to be another walk through step 1, step A. This isn't necessarily what this is. We're trying to get rid of this perception and try to make it so that you can have the most possible success as you walk through your projects. 50% of all IT projects fail. That's one of those throwaway kind of stats that you put up somewhere so some people can see that this is really important, so pay attention. But don't trust statistics with rounded numbers. I'll put that up there because anytime I ever see 50% of or 40% of, I'm like, wow, that's really exact, so I don't trust it. So make sure you don't either. And since 50% of you have never done All right, so our agenda. We are going to walk through the major types of project management. And I'm calling it the common types of project management, not necessarily major, because depending on what industry, and we're all in education, but depending on what your team makeup is, it usually determines how you run your projects. Some practical examples of some projects that have gone, or some ways to make it right, some ways that it could go wrong, how we manage our projects, which might be informative, might not, and then 5 tips to success. Why do projects fail? Usually projects fail for the same reasons every time, and a lot of that is very avoidable, but there's some things that are really specific, and we're going to talk through a lot of that, like how do you get buy-in? How do you make sure that your project team is doing the right things? What are some tools that you can use? So usually it's one of these things. Success was not defined, right? How can you know if a project is supposed to be complete if no one ever says, this is what the golden thing looks like, right? A lot of times you'll get a project like we need to install a bunch of servers, right? You're like, well, okay, so how many is a bunch, right? 5. What are we supposed to be doing with those? How much budget do we have? You start to ask questions, and not all the time, you don't always get clear answers to those questions. Loose planning. So, a bunch of servers, maybe we need to find a good vendor. Do we have a good vendor relationship? Yes, no, right? Back to that question of how many are we supposed to buy? And for what purpose? We don't necessarily know that all the time, so the plan is loose. Do we have the right resources? Stuff like that. We're going to go a little bit more to that in more detail later. Not enough money to complete the ask. It's amazing how many projects I get asked to do that are these big, huge projects, and then when I ask about budget, it's crickets, right? Maybe I'm the only one that deals with that, but it happens a lot to where we have to do these really big, deep, complex projects. They're like, oh yeah, make the cloud available to everyone, right? And I'm like, okay, so what's the cloud, and how do I make that available, right? So we have to, when we don't have enough money, it's really tough to make these things happen, but we all know that. Did not take into account culture change. That can be the biggest problem that you'll have when you're trying to create your project and trying to make your project successful. You'll have people who come to you and said, I had no idea that that thing that you were doing was going to cost me 3 more hours a day, right? I don't have 3 hours a day. Or you're making me learn something that I don't want to learn, can't learn, or you're just forcing this on me and I don't appreciate that. Culture change. Or this has taken away all these other things that I was doing, so I'm not sure how to fill the rest of my day. Sometimes that happens too. I've had people, office managers and such come to me and say, I do these other things, I file all these papers. What you're asking me to do is store this stuff somewhere else, so that removes a couple hours, so I'm trying to figure that out. So you have to consider those things. And then a little focus on buy-in. So buy-in is usually including knowing the needs of the people who are impacted by the project. Speaking the language, so getting out of the tech world and really knowing the language that people who are directly impacted by your project understand, so that you can reach some kind of common language. Sorry for turning my back to you guys. So reach common language. And what's in it for me? Everyone sees everything that you do from their perspective, right? So regardless of how brilliant you come across in your delivery of your project goals, your summaries, and all that stuff, you really have to get directly in touch with what's in it for them, right? What benefit does it have for them? So, common types of project management. That's you.
All right, I'm the traditionalist, and when you go to PMP school and you study the PMBOK, which is the project management system knowledge, it takes you through a pretty linear process of being very clear that you need to initiate the project, be very clear on the certain tools that you use to define this is how I can actually start even working on the project. There's various tools that take you through planning the project in a lot of detail before you even start doing anything. And then you execute, monitor, and control it, and that's kind of cyclical. And then you finally close the project. It's a great framework that has lots of tools that is helpful for you. And so if any of you have considered doing project management on a full-time basis, I think it's a great structure, but it isn't the end-all be-all. It just gives you a good set of tools to manage a variety of projects.
So the next couple that we're going to show you are ones that are commonly used, but the reason that I'm showing you is they're not necessarily commonly used in school district IT organizations. A lot of the vendors that we use, since a lot of things that we're going to are software as a service and such, it's probably good that we understand how they do business so that when we ask them for feature requests, when we say that you really need to change this in order to fit our organization, you understand why it takes them so long or why they get it wrong so many times or how you can best communicate it to them so that they can fit it into their cycles. So the first one is Agile. How many people use Agile daily in their tech organization? Oh, perfect. So I can say anything. So in Agile, you start with the product backlog. So basically saying that we have this product, and our backlog are all these things that we really need to do in order to make our product better, right? Our daily Scrum meetings, our sprint backlog. So in this whole daily Scrum meeting thing, there's these things called sprints. So they set up these 4-week sprints sometimes, or 5-week sprints. And what the sprint is we're going to take these 5 weeks, put everything that's in our product backlog or sprint backlog, right, which are a list of items that we really need to get things taken care of. We're going to put that in a 4-week cycle and do the best we can at the end of that 4 weeks and release something. So that was the whole thing I was saying, that sometimes the software that you get after the end of that 4 weeks isn't exactly what you were expecting because this is the process, right? They're itemizing themselves what they think is important. So if you're dealing with a software vendor that has a whole bunch of people, like a whole bunch of clients, then there's a good chance that the things that you asked for are somewhere on their list. So they might not get into that whole sprint backlog piece. So after the end of that sprint, 2 to 4 weeks, then you end up with your shippable item, which is your end package and product, so version 8.1, 8.2, and all that. Did that make sense? Yeah, no? Okay, thank you. So I need interaction, I'm sorry, I'm really... All right, so I'm an old football coach, so it's really hard for me when I'm saying something and people are looking at me like, because then we get plays wrong. So I just want to make sure that people are going, yeah, that's all right, or no, you keep talking. All right, so agile again, team's ability to respond unpredictably. So a lot of times, what happens in software development is you run into a bug or things like that. When those things happen, if you have like the old Microsoft model was refreshes would happen how often? Right, 1, 2, 3 years maybe. So what would end up happening is you'd have this software that was kind of sort of usable that you had to use, but you had to use it in its iteration for 18 months, right? With the Agile, it gives you the ability to say that, all right, this is wrong, we found out it's wrong, we can do a push immediately, which is the model that Microsoft is going to now. And that's all based on the fact that Google's been doing it since their beginning, and a lot of these other software in the cloud things have been doing that. So fast development, flexible change. The cons are little user involvement. So you do give your input, but you don't necessarily have a true voice depending on the company that you work with. This whole scope creep thing. So since you're going so fast, have so many different things or so many different factors which really determine whether or not they put it on their list, that means that the scope can creep substantially. So that thing that you asked for that was really important for your district, for your department, for any of your implementations might not necessarily get absorbed. So really easily scope creep. And then budget creep. So if you're paying for this service, right, you might end up having to spend more money to get your own developers to help them, or end up spending more money and time paying them to put your things higher on the priority list. We've actually had software vendors ask us for that. And needless to say, we're slowly getting out of those relationships. And then common uses. This is mostly used in software development, like I said previously. Scrum. Sometimes Agile and Scrum are treated as two separate things, but Scrum is actually an Agile methodology. You start with the expected outcome, which are your goals. So this is our goal for this development cycle. We're going to increase our attendance reports. Let's say it's the student information system. So as a part of that development cycle outcome, we're going to focus on these specific things during this sprint and during these Scrum sessions. We create our wish lists, which are those items that we're going to put in our software. We break them down into smaller chunks of sprints. So for this 2 weeks, we're going to do this. The next 2 weeks, we're going to do this. And then we decide that 2 weeks and then complete it, so forth and so on, do it again and again. So I've included this one because I felt it was interesting, this Kanban. So you might not use this tool, but a lot of people use this kind of thinking, this methodology. And what it is this is a tool called Trello. I use Trello a ton. The reason I use Trello a lot is because it allows me to create categories. It allows me to create tasks and then subtasks within there. So I can keep track of an entire project in Trello that says that these are the things that are completed. So I can drag these little cards from one section to another. I can drag them from the starting to the pending to I have problems with these things. I can give them color codes so at one glance I can see the status of everything. I can include calendar dates and such. So I like this tool a lot, and you might want to take a look at it just to manage subtasks within a project. Again, it's simple to use, visual, and the other thing about it is it's free. At least for the basic version, it's free, and you can invite people to see your tasks. So if you are a person who manages projects, or you are a person who is responsible for all the tasks in a project, you can create one of these, share it to people, and they'll have a good idea. The cons are it's non-traditional, so you probably will have feedback from people who just hate new things. Let me go past that. So how we do it. We're going to talk a little bit about, where are we at time-wise? We're way ahead, all right. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we do our projects. I think we're going to start with Cynthia.
I guess we start with me. And I really do believe that project management in many ways is kind of like herding cats. Your job as a project manager is to take everybody who's moving in multiple directions and trying to steer them towards one goal. But the most important thing is understanding what that goal is and making sure all the cats understand that what we want to do is get to that door by this time, right? So my goal here is to get you out of that door by 9:45, right? Can we agree on that? All right, so we got a goal. That's our project goal. I believe that flexibility is probably the biggest key. Because while like I said, I am a PMP and I've kind of studied this pretty rigid process, I do know that in life it's important to have that plan, but be able to deviate from it. And not only do you deviate from the plan, the exact specific steps, but you might also deviate in how you use the various tools. So if you're working with somebody and you say, okay, let's get together and let's work on a work breakdown structure. And they roll their eyes and go, oh, seriously, Cynthia, you're gonna lock us up in a room and we're gonna have to chunk down all our tasks into little bits and pieces. I don't want to do that. And so I will switch to working with them more on an individual basis and try to extract that information out and then compile it. And so I do a lot of background work to give the project team members more flexibility, which feeds into knowing the project team and what their needs are. So as a project manager, I always go in and try to understand the people that I'm working with, whether it be the customer, the people who I'm doing the project for, or my project team who's building either, installing switches or servers, and just trying to understand their motivation. And again, all of us want to get to the door by 9:45, and I can consistently remind them of that, and also talk to them about what their role is of getting to our goal. And then a last piece that is very important is getting fingerprints. And Jen there's nodding her head because we recently had a project where we missed that part. So you get fingerprints so that you don't get a slap in the face, okay? And what I mean by that is that very early on in your project, you start to assess your stakeholders and you think to yourself, and this is where the art comes into play, you have to look beyond just the obvious and sometimes dig deeper. So here's the example. We were converting our food service point of sale system from one system to the other. No big deal. We're just using different software. Shouldn't matter, right? Shouldn't be something that our superintendent needed to get involved with because we already had a point of sale system. We're going to another one, right? How many of you would think the superintendent really needed to know? Not many, right? Okay? But the superintendent had 2 young elementary school students. And we were converting from a 4-digit PIN code to a 7-digit PIN code. Now, how many people think we should have gotten fingerprints from the superintendent pretty early on in the project? Now all of a sudden I'm seeing head nods. Why? Because now he's a customer. He's an elementary parent. And what ended up happening is when he finally found out about it, like we're going to start rolling this out to elementary schools on a phased basis starting in March. And he was like, no, there's no way that my elementary kids are going to know a 7-digit PIN code in the middle of the school year. And so that was the head slap. So by looking at these things and thinking through who your customers are, when somebody in certain positions, you have to look at them in different roles. I think that's the point I'm trying to make. All right, so that's how I manage projects, is I try to take many different factors and put them all together and be flexible and treat project management more as in kind of an art than a science. Your turn. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, there's a lot of wardrobe involved with this. All right, so before we get into how I manage projects, which is all over the place, are there any questions about anything that we've gone over so far? Any need for clarification? Any, you want us to do it all again?
With Trello,
Yeah.
some complaints I've heard is you give up your data, right? You can't get it back out. You can't back it up or whatnot. Have you looked at any open source replacements? There's a few out there. And you get to keep all your stuff instead of giving it away.
Yeah, but it depends on like what the value of that stuff is. So, I mean, what it does is it allows you to export things in, kind of an XML, JSON version. Yeah, it lets you do that. Yeah, an XML JSON, but it doesn't do it in CSV, which would be way more useful, right? So it's one of those kind of things you deal with. You try to figure out, okay, is it more important for me to get the stuff back? Because normally, if I put things in Trello, I already have it somewhere else, right? So for me, it's not really a big deal, and I'm not putting any student information or anything confidential, so that's not even, no IP addresses, none of that. So usually that's just to make sure that I'm keeping track of tasks. So someone knows exactly what they're supposed to do when it's expected of them and such. So it's a risk thing. Yes.
You said you're using Trello. Cynthia, what do you use it for something like that?
Basically, I used to use Excel, and now I use Google Sheets, and basically keep track of things more on a spreadsheet.
And Trello is one of the things that I use for certain things, and that's usually for like smaller projects where I don't need to do a whole entire plan and all that other stuff. If I need to do all that, I use a combination of SharePoint, strangely enough, SharePoint lists, because in SharePoint 2013, when you have a task list, you can do tasks and subtasks, and then you can assign those to people, do due dates and all that. And then additionally, you can do Gantt charts and all that stuff for the people who love Gantt charts, and I rarely ever use them, but I still have people who ask for them. So I can do a Gantt chart list view so that you can have all that available to people, and they're happy about that. So I use a combination of things.
I have a follow-up. On the Trello, is that available on multiple devices?
Yeah, so right now I have Trello on my Android phone, my iPad, wherever that is, and also, so because this is web-based, and it's also has an app. So yeah, it's multiple devices. And normally, when I use things, there always have to be kind of multiple devices. So, any other questions? Good questions. Sam, also, I have an ulterior motive. We're like way ahead on time, and I want to make sure that we, because, when you're doing this in your head, you're thinking, hour, 15 minutes, that's a long time. I'm going to do 1,000 slides, but I don't want to kill everybody with that. Yeah, that's a good question. So is anyone using anything traditional, like Project or something like that, or just Excel?
I've used Project before, not extensively, but just for summer projects.
Yeah.
Manage multiple projects at the same time. I use that.
Yeah, Project is kind of a heavy lift for me. The reason being is because it comes with its own kind of learning curve. And additionally, if you put something in Project, you're the only person that can put things in and out. And so I like to delegate some of that stuff, and I'm like, no, I want my application manager to do some pieces, assign some tasks, and do that whole thing. And I don't want to have to teach them Project. So it is, Project is one of those Microsoft things that they sold to project managers just to kind of make it, oh yeah, this is the comprehensive. No, most people do it in Excel and do a pretty good job with it, or a combination of other tools.
We just started using Asana.
Asana. So is Asana kind of like?
Projects, and you can all kind of interact and
Excellent. Yep. I think something like Asana is Basecamp. So we've used Basecamp as well, kind of online. But we use Basecamp usually when we're dealing with our vendors, so that we can all kind of collaborate across regions and such, because they have developers that are in India and other places. Anyone else using anything besides those?
We use a Wunderlist, just a task manager, and you can share it out, and it's free.
It's funny, Wunderlist, I use Wunderlist every single day. I don't really use it for projects. I use it to keep track of the projects that I'm going to do. But yeah, Wunderlist is, people at my district hate when I talk about Wunderlist because I talk about it all the time. I might as well have stock because it's one of the most amazing things. If you don't have Wunderlist, you can have it on all your devices. You can do nested lists, so where you have one list and inside you have all your subtasks. And then now that it's integrated with Microsoft, you can connect it directly to your calendar so that if you have a due date in your Wunderlist, it automatically goes to your calendar and such. It's a pretty cool tool. Anyone else? Yes.
I've seen, I personally use to-do list. I don't know if it's multiple devices.
Yeah, Todoist, yeah.
Yeah, and then the other one that I've seen is, people use OneNote. People use OneNote for all their resume.
Yep. So OneNote, I use OneNote a lot too, and that's usually when I'm writing my initial project overview and details. So like I said, I use a bunch of different tools. OneNote is the other one. I do actually these OneNote professional learning sessions for our district, and I try to bring people in who are like not untech savvy. I don't know of a better way to put that, but untech savvy. And we usually do these learning sessions to where we walk through all the intricacies of OneNote. Since we're Office 365 and Google Apps, we have some people who don't like Google for whatever reason, so we make sure that everything is available. But I show them the integration between OneNote Online and also desktop OneNote and inserting videos, pictures, and we do shared OneNote notebooks for those and for project overviews and such. So, anyone else? So, how I manage projects. I usually begin with the end in mind. So, why? Sometimes this is a tough question to ask depending on where you sit in an organization. I ask why, and I ask probably 10 whys for every single project. So, if someone comes to me and says, we want you to manage this server project, we're going to do 20 servers, redesign a portion of our data system, put some new librets in and all that. I'll ask the question, why? Why are we doing that? Because sometimes they might think that it's obvious, but you want to ask the question, why? Other stuff is getting old. Okay, so maybe that's a reason. But really, how old is our current, is there a problem right now? Yeah, there's a problem. We have a little leak in our libret. Okay, so that's fine. Do we need to replace it or can we get it fixed? Right? We're asking questions so that we can limit the scope. And also, the why really gets down to the root of the motivation for the project. Because a lot of times the motivation is something that might be political, right? And you need to understand that so that you can understand the rest of the details of your project. The what. So now that you've talked through the why, the what is what exactly are we trying to do, right? What do you really want done? Sometimes it's ambiguous, so which goes back to that whole success wasn't defined thing. What are we trying to do? What is your end goal? And is there a certain way that you're expecting me to do that, right? Because sometimes there's a certain expectation that just because I said I want you to install servers, that you know exactly what that means. So make sure that we ask the what. Who? So who are our stakeholders? Who are the people who are asking for this? The people who are directly impacted positively, right? So the people that this can really benefit, because again, that culture change that we talked about before, you really want to understand how it's going to change their culture so that you can address that. And then negative impact. Who is this going to hurt, right? This might hurt several people. So you need to understand what that means, because just like the example that Cynthia gave, you really have to understand that if I make this change, there might be some people that are hidden, and really talk to and think through that. And this is all the stuff that I do before I even really truly write anything down that I give to someone else for a project plan or an overview and such. And then the when, which is obviously a timeline. But also, are there things that are baked into this project that need to be done at certain times, right? So if this is multiple phase, maybe I can chop it in half and say that there's some things that need to be done in a month. There's some things that, so you want to get what the acceptable timeline is. So really think about what could go right? What could go right? What's the best way to make sure that that happens? So have a clear vision in your mind of what is the best that can possibly happen based on this project. How do I sustain those things? So just because I built this thing doesn't mean that this thing can stay up forever, because a project really is something that has a definite beginning date and definite end date. So if it doesn't have an end date, then it is not a project. All right? Some people will argue that, but no, a project has a definite start date and a definite end date. So at the end of all of that, you've asked all those why, what, where, who questions. You can end up with something that is a goal statement, right? So what's the benefit of all this? This is what we're trying to get to, and that'll help to really enhance the rest of your documentation. What can go wrong? An example. This is not a political statement, all right? So we're not going to argue that. This is not me saying my views. This is saying what can go wrong when you really haven't considered a lot of things that we just talked about in your project. So why? The why for the project and the why that the Affordable Care Act thing happened, it depends on who you ask. Some people say, well, it was only about insurance for people who didn't have insurance. Some people are like, oh, it's political. You know, right? Depending on who you ask, the why is ambiguous. And again, if the why is ambiguous, then open it for interpretation. You're always going to have problems. Ambiguity in the message leads to dissension in the ranks. So if your message isn't clear, then there's a very good chance that someone's going to be upset about it. And I came up with that, so. What is it? It's a registration/shopping site, because that's really what that is. It's a site where I can register and shop. So if it's a registration and shopping site and it's government, you would think that you would ask people who are really good at registration and shopping sites, right? Because if you were the person who was responsible for this, there's a very good chance that you're thinking, some of the basic numbers and all that, which we'll talk about in a second. And maybe I should ask a subject matter expert, or I probably have a subject matter expert on my team. It's very important that we make sure that we talk to the people who know this stuff, right? Who know exactly what our scope is of our project and know exactly what some of the technical limitations can be. So who? The uninsured, and these are some kind of rough numbers. So if there were 15% at the time uninsured, that equals 52.5 million people, right? And I'm estimating that 5% had interest in the first day. It's probably higher than that, but I wanted to, kind of be objective. Say 5% first day, which equals 2.6 million participating on the first day. So when you think about it like this, like numbers, and I'm not necessarily sure that anyone did this based on the result, but if you look at the numbers, right, as a network person, I'm looking at those numbers because I was a network engineer in a past life, did a lot of that type stuff. So when I walked through the numbers, the first thing I was thinking was, you've just created a distributed denial of service botnet. That's what you did. Because you basically said that I'm going to create this demand, this need, but I'm not going to consider how best to supply that need, right? Because when you look through, when you do the postmortem on it, a lot of people say that the reason that thing went wrong was because people couldn't reach the servers, right? And there's several reasons that people can't reach servers. One of the main ones is capacity. So if you didn't build it thinking that you were going to have a whole bunch of people go to it all at the same exact time, then you've created your own attack. Senior management immediately states they were never informed of the risks or technical issues. That was taken from Huffington Post. Right? So, when? October 15th. It wasn't clearly conveyed as a beginning, right? Whenever all the documentation that I read about this and all the communication was basically saying that this was a deadline. So you've just created demand and said, I want every single person that is uninsured in the United States to hit my website at the exact same time. Do it. I'm ready. Right? That's basically what you're saying. So being very clear about our communication. So I'm thinking that there wasn't a clear communication plan developed saying that these are the messages that we really need to get out to people. This is what the project is about. This is what we expect you to do. This is what we don't expect you to do. Very clear communication plan. So the launch date for the project is determined by someone in the senior-most levels. This has probably happened to us saying that, all right, we're going to go live on September 1st, right? School start. We're going to go live on September 1st, right? Right now, if someone gave you a really huge project that was going to start on September 1st, how would you feel about that, right? It's May. Some people think that's a long time, right? I start my project planning for the next year usually in February. The reason being is because I know that I always get a project in August. Always. Regardless, I get a project in August. And it's usually not something small. It's like, oh yeah, we're going to install 500 Chromebooks at this school. Like, okay, so that means wireless and, a few other things that we need to take care of, accounts, maybe, right? So you try to think through this stuff, and and that doesn't come from you. So that's why we ask the questions. Okay, so 600, is there any way we can get them, broken down into chunks? Does it all need to be the first day? What does that look like as far as curriculum? All those other things, we can ask those questions. So resources, do we have enough of the right ones? Are we? Okay. Budget, do we have enough budget to start this project, right? Do we have enough budget to sustain this project? Very simple questions. Sometimes we don't have the answers, but these are things to think about. Project team, who do I have on my team? Who do I have directly on my team, right? So if it's a development project, I don't know about you, who has developers on their staff or on their team? You guys are fortunate. What district are you in? All right. Now I know. Anyone else? Excellent. Who has 2 or more developers? Raise your hand. Wow. You guys are balling. Man, that is excellent. I'm glad to hear that. Because the reason being is because if school districts are going to be agile in what they're trying to do and really innovative, then you're going to need developers. Because you want to be able to not have to buy everything off the shelf and wait for people to develop things. You want to be able to do it all yourself. And at one point, when I first got into school districts in the late 90s, there were always developers on teams for that reason. Because a lot of the software just wasn't available, so you had to develop your own. We went away from that when people started to sell it online and such, but now we seem to be needing to go back to that. Even though there's a lot of software available, it doesn't always fit our instructional needs. Other departments. Sometimes there's a resource in another department who has the skills that you need in order to get a project done. So it's very good to know who those people are and to incorporate those people into your project. Do I need consultants or contractors? So again, depending on scope and depending on who you have, you might need to go outside. And do I need other departments to be truly engaged in my project team? And normally you do, especially in a school district. So a side conversation. Everything that we do when we're managing a project has to do with relationships unless you're doing the whole entire project yourself. But then it still has to do with relationships because if you don't have good relationships with the people who you're delivering this to, they're not going to trust what you're delivering. So it's very important for us to understand. So this is a bonus section, and this was the just in case you're way over and you talked way too fast kind of thing. So reputation is based on results. I hate to sound like I'm preaching, but I am preaching right now. Is the fact that as you develop your technology reputation, so make sure that you're communicating with people, make sure that they understand that every time that you deliver something, it's going to be your best. Then what starts to happen is you get a little bit of grace when something doesn't necessarily go right, right? People will go, yeah, you know what, they always do their very best. Oh, so something messed up, that's okay. We understand that you didn't do that on purpose because that's not your track record. Reputation based on results. Trust is built on follow through. So ask questions. Hey, I just installed that thing for you. How did you feel about it? What piece of what I installed for you was the best part of it? What was the worst part of it? So that you can get an idea and then extrapolate that for the next and apply that to the next time you do a project. So you can say, maybe we should emphasize these pieces in our communication plan and such. Relationships built based on goal alignment. That's the whole what's in it for me. So what's in it for you should be the same thing as what's in it for me. So I understand what you're trying to do. I understand where you're trying to get to. I understand, the objectives. I understand the people that you're trying to impact. And those things are important to me too. You have to have the same goals because then you approach the project differently from a different level of intensity, we'll say. So this is the one thing. So this is my toolbox, right? There is one document that if you don't do any project management, you don't really track any kind of documentation, because documentation can be a dirty word to technology people sometimes because we have a lot of things to do and documentation that falls off the task list. But I'm telling you, documentation is one of the most important things. The reason being is because it makes it to where you're able to communicate what you've done. It makes it to where you can go back and say, oh, that was that mistake I made. Or, oh, that was that great thing I did, and be able to communicate that directly to people. But this is the document I use. So if you forget everything else we've talked about, try to keep this somewhere in your mind. This is what I do as a 1-page or 2-page, sometimes 3-page document that I give to people when I'm creating this large project, right? This is what I put together. So this is what I call my project overview, right? I created a project overview template in Word, and I use the same standard template every single time. So I have the overview, this blue section at the top. I wish this had a pointer. Blue section at the top here is the just the title. So whatever the name of your project is, your completion date. Sometimes that's random, but we try to keep that completion date. Project summary. So I try to keep it as succinct as possible. Usually it's a paragraph or two that says that this project is trying to do these things. So it's everything that you determined in your what, where, why kind of section. This project is trying to do, and make sure that you're keeping your audience in mind. So if you know that your project summary is going to, your supervisor, or it's going to the board, or whoever it's going to, keep your audience in mind as you write through what the summary is and put it into language that they understand. Project goals. So these are the specific things that were stated to you as being important as part of this project. Make sure that you put the goals in, give them bullets. And then sub-projects and tasks. In order to make sure that this project gets done, these are the following tasks, and all these are high level. So you don't have to do like each individual, like plug this into port A6. You don't have to do all that in this document. You just state the fact that that's going to need to be done at some point. So, project team responsibilities. So I normally name every single department or even divisions within my department and what they're supposed to be doing, like at a high level, right? So like let's say that this was a website design, right? That's administration, their responsibility is sign off, so I put that in here. Applications team, their responsibility is make sure that we have good lists for employees, for phone numbers and all that stuff and some of the content. Services team, make sure that they go out and they maybe do some training, desktop and such. So we keep track of all that, systems teams and such. Make sure that we're keeping track of people's responsibilities. But this is an exercise more than anything to make sure that you're thinking through the things that need to be done as part of your project. Issues. So that step 6 piece is very important. Sometimes you're thinking that I told everyone that this was going to be a problem, right? There's been times where I've had projects and I've said, you know what, this might be something that and then later on, no, I don't remember hearing that, right? This is where you put that. This may be a problem. This is how we get rid of the problem. So if you're giving a problem, make sure that you give a solution as well. But this is our issue section, very important. Critical path items. There's several things that need to be taken care of in order for us to have success, right? So in order for us to do BGP, in order for us to do a secondary internet pipe, we need to make sure that we talk to Aaron and get a secondary ID, right? Because that's something that's absolutely necessary. If we don't write that in here, we'll get to the end of our project, we have all our infrastructure in place, but we don't have an IP address for our secondary interface. Very important. We put those critical path items here in that section. Test and acceptance plan. Also important. We need to understand that this is what we're going to do to test, right? This is what the conditions that should be met in order for it to be signed off by the person that we have listed in the administration. And task status to date. So this can be a living document as well. We can put in, we've done these tasks and taken care of these things. Follow-up tasks, so things that we need to do after the project is done, and completion sign-off. So normally what I'll do is once the project is done, I'll print out a final version of this. I'll give it to whoever was the person who initiated this project, and then I'll scan it, put it in a SharePoint somewhere, and make sure that it's protected so that no one can delete it and say that they never signed it. All right, so 5 takeaways. If you forget everything else that we talked about, 5 takeaways. Ask questions, lots and lots and lots of questions as you go through your project. Make sure that you understand the pieces. And don't think that you're bothering someone, because the real bother is going to be if they expected something and didn't get it because you didn't ask. Visualize your success, what's your goal, and your failure risk, right? And name them both. It's not an I told you so. It's I understood what the risk was. I documented what the risk was. We talked about what the risk was. There was no end goal, right? Or this is what or from the from the perspective of the stakeholder. This is what I thought we were going to do, right? Wasn't written down clearly anywhere, right? You didn't write down your goal. Then you end up with some problems. So you see your head nod. That's happened to you, right? So we need to make sure we visualize both and document both. Research your intended users. Understand that if you're going to be rolling something out K to 2, that might be different than 3 to whatever. Don't automatically assume that the person that's coming to you knows every single thing about what they're asking you to do. All right, that's basically what that is. And then also make sure that whatever you're delivering fits. So that's part of the thing is you might think that that's on the person who initiated the project, but if the finger is going to be pointing at you, you have responsibility to do all this stuff. And plan using a tool you're comfortable with. We talked about a lot of tools, right? But the reality is whatever tool works best for you to manage your project, to be able to share and communicate is going to be the best tool for you. You don't have to use Microsoft Project. That's not a requirement for dealing with projects, because if it was, then there's probably a good chance that I've only done one project in my life, which isn't the truth. And document what you've learned. Again, the dirty D word. It's very important for us to document. Very important for us to document what we've learned. We can put that in our project overview document, that one that I showed you, probably at the end, to say that these were some of the things that were important. These are things that I should probably do the next time, so that you can have something to refer to and not rely on our memory. The faintest ink is better than the clearest memory. There are some times where we're believing that, oh yeah, it happened just this way, but then you go back and you look at the email, oh, not quite. So make sure we have that. So we have zoomed through, We have some minutes left. I know we went through that kind of fast. Are there any questions? No. Anyone? Yeah, I'll make it. I'll make it available to you. We're going to make it available as part of the in the ACPE app, because we have the. There's a problem. So I created all that in Microsoft Sway. I had the backup plan, which was our Google slide deck that we had, and it looks a little bit different because of the interactivity, but we can give the same information out in the slide deck, and we'll make it a part of the app. Any other questions?
Are you using agile methodologies with non-developers?
You know what? We have slowly started to move in that direction. I've been thinking about going and getting the Scrum Master, cert, and some of the agile, some of the agile training, so that we can do some of that. The problem is I have some of the same people that serve on a bunch of different teams, and our projects are normally kind of, come as, come may type deals.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. Like, for development and your developers, it easily maps out to what their skill sets are and their processes, right? But
Yep.
not so much for your engineers, and that's what we've really been struggling with.
See, and that's the whole software piece, and yeah, we've struggled with that as well, but the issue that I normally have is to being able to really help those people that you're talking about understand what their role is in a project, and then helping them to tell me the tasks that they need to do, right, and how it's important. And that's why I kind of stepped through it the way that I did, is because if we can all start out with understanding what the goal is, and then understand what some of the potential issues are, because you know how your network engineers are very good at telling you what the potential issues are. And if you talk to them early, they'll really tell you what the issues are, right? You talk to them late, then it turns into a whole different kind of conversation, like who's the fool that, it happens. Maybe that's just my engineers, but any other, yes?
I really like the document you have. I use something similar. The only thing I have on mine that you don't is I have in scope and out of scope, like what I'm not trying to solve with this project.
See, I would write out of scope, but I think that would give people ideas of what to try to include in the project. I don't want to give anybody any ideas, Sorry, I just need to keep the scope tight. Anyone else? Any other questions? I'm going to speak up. I seriously have 20 minutes, and when...
We added like a cost value to the out of scope stuff. Here's the scope of work and beyond this.
Oh.
Would be an additional.
That is a way to do it. I appreciate that. Now I'm gonna add it. That was good. I'm glad you asked the question. See, this is why we ask questions. So I'm gonna add that to say that this will cost you approximately, blah. Thank you. Yes.
As far as projects that you oversee, how much of that goes into public works and not public works? How is that, if there's projects that you're trying to oversee that you can, once you establish whether a project falls under the public works world, there's sometimes some different governing requirements, right?
Yep.
And do you guys interface with a different department on that, or how do you handle that?
Usually, in our district, we have a project manager of facilities, right? And the facilities will do all the public works, and then we'll be like a sub, like they'll act as a PMO, and we'll act as a project management office, and we'll act as a sub project to that. But then we have a fully baked project that's all the technology pieces that are part of whatever the public works is. So like building, a school or something like that type of thing. We do our pieces, and they're all integrated. So we have meetings. We make sure that we talk through little things so that we don't run into an example that I had earlier on the ride up here was that, you get to the last piece and people are like, all right, do we need projectors or do we need, screens and stuff like that? You don't have those. You have those conversations early because maybe that's part of the construction. And you want to make sure that you don't add costs and things like that. So we make sure that we integrate, but we don't handle those specifically for that reason that you named, because that's usually housed in facility, and they have a different kind of org structure, so we're separate. Good question. Nothing? All right. Well, so if you guys would humor me, because I always told myself I would do this, right? I always told myself I would take a selfie with a class that, or a talk that I did with a bunch of people if it was over 5 people, because my family doesn't count, right? Plus, this is public, and I'm gonna tweet it. So if you're, on the wanted list, then make sure you duck your head, all right? And since you're technology people, I'm pretty sure some of you are.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, sure.
When you're managing your team, how do you decide when you're just simply delegating tasks versus drawing people into a project?
So I see those two as kind of related. The way that I manage my team is real relational. So I've made it to the point to where they trust that if I'm giving them something, it's part of something bigger, and I always tell them what that bigger thing is. So they always know that they're part of a project, or they all know that it's a task, or they know that this is just something that needs to be done right now. I'm really clear about those things so that there's never any ambiguity. Because I have a fairly small team for the amount of things that we do, but the reason that we're able to do so much is because I have them convinced that we're going to always do the right thing because of that track record, right? We built that reputation that says that we do our best work all the time. People trust us. They ask us to be at the table. Oh, the one thing that I didn't mention is that there's this love-hate thing about meetings. I love meetings. The reason I love meetings is because it allows me to be at the table, and I don't hear things late. Because everyone will complain about, wow, if I would have just known that, right? I mean, everyone who works in a technology project has had that. I wish I would have known that. But if you have someone in the room, then paying attention, then they can document that stuff. They can be part of the initial conversation. And I'm usually part of that initial conversation. And I can say, you know what, have you thought of this? Oh, that probably saved us a month, right? You can be part of the conversation, which is really important. I'm hoping that kind of answered your question. Okay. Yes?
I know that most of your role, both of you guys have a lot of direct reports that, so you're doing project management and you're also the boss, right? Do you have suggestions for people who are doing like project coordination or project management that don't have direct reports and what the difference is as far as getting those folks to do the things that you need done? Because I know that at least in my role, and I know if we apply to other folks in the room, that's the situation. We don't talk, we can't tell people what to do, when to do it, and that kind of thing. How do you continue to have those folks that you need to get the project done, help
I think the key is talking to people a lot and finding out where they're at. So when you start to see that they're not maybe meeting a deadline because they're getting distracted with other tasks that they have to do, it's kind of inserting yourself and saying, hey, what's going on here? And they're going, well, you know, I've been assigned these other projects, I'm working on this. And if you have that focus of, this is what we need to get done by this date, then it's going to their boss perhaps, and just, you know, and I think I'm the light project manager, or whatever you want to call it, where I build more on relationships, and I'll go and talk to somebody and say, hey, you know, we're trying to get this project done, and so says they're being pulled away for this, what can we do? So I negotiate through, what can we do to free up some of his time so that he can work on this? And so a lot of that, managing the pieces that are along the critical path and knowing when to insert yourself and when not to. Does that make sense? It's just really keeping track of that critical path and knowing that I've got to fix this problem now, otherwise the project's going to get derailed. And otherwise, if it's not on the critical path, I'm going to let that go, touch base with them periodically, and focus on the stuff that has to keep going.
And the one thing that I'll add to that is that whole section about the results without authority, that's actually what that was. That's the reason that I put that whole section in there, is because I haven't always had a staff. You know, when I first started with project management, you know, I was a network engineer, right? So it was just me, and you know, I had things that needed to be done, so I decided that I was going to put it into a methodology and do it. But it was based on the fact that I had to do a lot of work with the relationship piece. So I had to make sure that I was talking to a lot of people, making sure they understood that I have their best interest in mind so that they can trust what I'm trying to do. And then that allows you to be able to bring those people into a team. It allows you to assign tasks, not necessarily directly assign tasks, but to really help them to understand how this task helps the organization as a whole. It's not just about me, it's about, you know, us and what we're trying to do, and that really starts to help. But it's all about those relationships and clear communication about what the goals are. So, any other questions? Oh yeah. Well, no, I'm.
Copy of your template?
Yeah. So I'm gonna put my email address up right here at the end, and then with that, if you can just send me an email saying, hey, you know, add my name to who has access to the slide thing, and then I'll make sure you get access. So you have access to the sway, and then we're going to put the PDF piece on the conference. But if you want to have access to it the way that it was there, then you know, that'll be the whole sway thing. All right. Any more questions? All right. So hold on. Oh no, I think I'm trying to figure out. So thank you. That's us. Cynthia said that she will act as a consultant. No, she didn't say that. She said you can email Cynthia at the address here. That's my address. I think that's my address. And then I'm making sure I put the right one up there, so you'll be emailing someone else named Tashawn. So and then the @technique is my Twitter. I probably have like 7 tweets. I've committed to tweeting more this year, mainly because I wanted to have more visibility to the projects we're working on, because I was given some advice by someone higher up in our organization that we really need to be way more visible, because you guys are doing good work and we want people to see the work that you're doing and, you know, see that you're involved and see that you're understanding on top of technology and such. So that's what we're going to start doing. So those 2 things, if you're doing Twitter, follow me, I'll follow you. We'll make sure that we change the world. So I'm going to take this real quick picture. No, I want to do it selfie style. All right.
He wants to do a selfie.
All right. Everybody wave. There we go. So
how many people got selfie sticks at the Platinum place?
All right, I got to take one more. I was frowning. Let's try that again. I'm gonna try to smile this time. I know. It's like that project management. Goodness gracious. All right. So it's gonna count. I hope everyone can see that. Wave. There we go. You guys have been awesome and incredible. We appreciate you. Thank you very much.
Good job. You did
Yeah,
great.
good job. You did too. Thank you very much for your help.
I was just, this support here.
I'm surprised that we actually got through like the time. That's the hard part for me. I was like, wow, we're not going to be able to fill that time up. But thank you for keeping track of it.
Yeah, no. You know, I sit there and go, okay, I've been managing projects for 20-something years, and this very informal sort of, I actually get stuff done. And I'm thinking, how do I do it?
Yeah, how do you do it?
I don't know. It's all in my
That's exactly it. That was the problem that was happening. I was like, ah.
I just know what needs to be done when.
Yeah, you just kind of react to things. You're like, you know,
Yeah.
you just react to things the same way all the time. That's part of what, I mean, at least the same kind of general way, with the same kind of thinking. Well, not the same
No, like
exact.
I said, I think my emphasis is in the art
Oh yeah.
of picking the one important thing that other people are missing and going, we ought to pay attention to this thing. Otherwise, this project is going to go down in flames.
Yes, yes, and this is what that means to you,
And
kind of thing.
it's like, yeah.
I mean.